Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge running back rankings for week 16 of the fantasy football season. A couple of quick things before we get into the rankings. First of all, come visit me live on Saturday this week. Don't forget about that. The main slate of games will be on Saturday, 1 hour prior to kickoff, and I will have my final rankings up on the screen all over the place. So that brings up another thing, is that these are not my final rankings. Some switches, some changes will be made throughout the week. Sometimes major, sometimes not so major. And, especially if any major news comes out for any players, which there have been some running backs, actually. A few quick bits of running back news that I should go over. Kenneth Walker is a we'll see this week, so that's interesting. I would hope that that's more of a we'll see him do well than not. So currently I have him ranked as if nothing is going on there, but we'll listen to the news on that. Then Jonathan Taylor has been placed on IR. Khalil Herbert was designated to return, or will be designated to return, so he is expected to be playing this weekend. And Jeff Wilson is also expected to be playing this weekend at, hopefully, everything as of now, everything somewhat major. My tight end rankings and my quarterback rankings have already been up, so check those out if you have not yet. And my wide receiver rankings should be coming out, I believe, tomorrow morning, so Thursday morning, as soon as I can get them up. Quarterback and tight end rankings are already up on the website, www.theFFForge.com, where all of my projections are up. So I put the players in my ranked order, but you can see projections for an expected range. And I also have floors and ceilings if you are looking to find the player who has the highest ceiling. You really need a shot, especially weeks like this where the games are a little bit more spread out than normal. You can sometimes make some of those decisions based on how the games have been going against your opponent already. And of course, same thing with the floor. You just need to be a security blanket of a guy. You can check out the floors and those floors and rankings, floors and ceilings projections. Now let's just get right into the running backs. And over here on the far left, you can see these are my rankings, followed by the player name, the opponent. This is the difficulty of that opponent. Here is the ECR. This is the expert consensus ranking. This is where I start for these rankings. And this week I've been doing my projections first. That's why everything's been a little spread out more than normal. So that way these rankings are going to be much closer to my final rankings than most weeks have been. And then over here is the difference between myself and the experts. And I will be talking about some of the guys who I have the biggest difference with compared to the experts. And other than that, if you have any start-sit questions, feel free to ask them. Let's just get moving here with my first tier of running backs, starting off at my RB1 with Christian McCaffrey, followed by Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Ramondre Stevenson, Kenny Walker, Tony Pollard, Nick Chubb, and James Conner to wrap that tier up. And the only player here that I have a big difference with the experts is Kenneth Walker, who I have ranked 8th. The ECR on him is 18, so I have him 10 spots ahead of the ECR. Kansas City is a pretty decent matchup. This could be a fairly higher scoring game, and I'm expecting good things from Kenny. I will say the two players behind him here, Tony Pollard and Nick Chubb, are both safer plays than Kenny Walker, but I like the ceiling, I guess, just a little bit more with Kenneth Walker. And once again, I have faith in him returning to his greatness this week against Kansas City. So hopefully that will be true. And that brings us to my second tier of running backs, which is pretty large, starting off with Aaron Jones. And actually, I just want to mention, these tier breaks, they're not perfect. It is what it is. So let's start off with Aaron Jones at running back 12, followed by Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, Travis Etienne Jr., Miles Sanders, Isaiah Pacheco, Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift, Ezekiel Elliott, Jerick McKinnon, J.K. Dobbins, David Montgomery, and Leonard Fournette to wrap up that tier at RB24. Our first culprit up here is going to be Isaiah Pacheco, who I have 5 spots ahead of the ECR. I have him ranked 17th. The ECR on him is 22nd. Going up against Seattle is an excellent matchup for running backs, so that's good for both him and Jerick McKinnon, I'm sure, but I'm really expecting this to be an Isaiah Pacheco game. The traditional running attack against Seattle has worked really well, so I'm expecting him to do well this week, and that's as simple as it is. We'll get to the counterpart in just a minute, right after DeAndre Swift, who I've ranked 19th, which is 6 spots ahead of the ECR. The ECR on him is 25. Going up against Carolina, and this is has a lot to do with the projections. I was happy to see his usage increase again last week after it had decreased, and I think we're hopefully back to normal there. So there's obviously, for any DeAndre Swift owners, they know how scary it is to be putting him out there. but I am expecting him to find some success this week against Carolina, and I just like the upside with him more than a few of these guys. Not like Jerick McKinnon doesn't have any upside, though. But like I said, I'm expecting this to be an Isaiah Pacheco week, and so that needs to be resembled a little bit in my rankings. And here at 21, I have Jerick McKinnon 5 spots behind the ECR. I have him ranked 21st, like I said, and the ECR in him is 16th. Going up against Seattle, just talking about that for Isaiah Pacheco. It's a good matchup. The one thing here that I wanted to point out is that, Jerick McKinnon's 2 touchdowns last week came on 20 and 26-yard plays. That's not something that's highly replicable in a game-to-game basis. It has been 2 great weeks for Jerick McKinnon, but I'm just, I don't want to rank him too highly based on a couple of recent performances. I always want to take the season-long approach when we're working with such small sample sizes. So I'm just, a little apprehensive about it, but of course we've seen there's some great upside to Jerick McKinnon, and that's why he makes the top 24 this week, where he was not up here not too long ago, even last week. Now let's move on to my third tier of running backs here. At RB25, I have Zonovan Knight, followed by Latavius Murray, Raheem Mostert, Rashad White, Singletary, Devin, and then Jamal Williams, A.J. Dillon, and Zach Moss to wrap that up at RB32. We really only have one running back to speak about here, and that's going to be Raheem Mostert going up against Green Bay. It's a really good matchup. I like him and Jeff Wilson this week. Like we said, Jeff Wilson is expected to play. There is just some concern as to the amount of uses that Jeff Wilson would have or not, but I have them projected to be eating into each other's work some here. It's been pretty uncertain for those two when they're both active, whose game it's going to be. And really against Green Bay, I would think it would be a Jeff Wilson game more than Raheem Mostert, but there's that unknown concern factor with him coming back off of injury. Anyways, I have Raheem Mostert ranked 8 spots behind the ECR at 27. The ECR on him is 19, and I just kind of explained exactly why. So let's just move on to the next tier of running backs, starting off at RB33 with Cordero Patterson, followed by Marlon Mack, Deonta Foreman, Antonio Gibson, Tyler Algier, Cam Akers, Chuba Hubbard, Brian Robinson Jr., Michael Carter, and Deon Jackson to wrap that up. Here at Marlon Mack, I have 13 spots ahead of the ECR. I'm ranked 34th. The ECR number is 47th. I used last week's stats pretty heavily to project Marlon Mack and Deon Jackson, and this is what essentially I got out of him. I mean, he projected higher because he has such a high percentage for his touchdown percentage right now, but the value of some of the work that he gets has been pretty high, and so, I like him enough this week, and I hope I don't steer anybody wrong on that. I'll look a little bit more into this backfield when I get a chance, just to make sure I feel comfortable with that before we get to the final rankings on Saturday. Then Antonio Gibson, I have ranked 36, which is 4 spots ahead of the ECR. The ECR is 40. Going up against San Francisco, really tough matchup. I do expect this to be more of a friendly matchup for Antonio Gibson compared to Brian Robinson Jr. That and projections are the reason that I have him ahead of Brian Robinson and thus ahead of where the experts have both of them. Then we get to Cam Akers, who I have 5 spots behind the ECR. The ECR on him is 33rd. I have him ranked 38th going up against Denver. I don't know why my projections don't like him very much. I'm sure part of it has to do with chances for a touchdown, and so I will heed that going up against Denver. It's a mediocre matchup, been easier as of late, and Cam has been getting hot as of late, and that's why he is ranked into the 30s now. So, not the worst play. There's a lot of guys, yet again, this week that could do something, that's for sure. Then last up in this tier, we have Brian Robinson Jr., who I've ranked 40th, 8 spots behind the ECR. The ECR on him is 32nd, going up against San Francisco. It's a really, really tough matchup, and so I expect Brian Robinson to struggle. I expect the team to struggle. And I just think that favors Antonio Gibson as far as how that team will utilize those two. And then we get our last tier here ranking, starting off at running back 43 with James Cook, Kareem Hunt, Gus Edwards, Jalen Warren, Samaje Perine, and Jordan Mason to wrap that tier up at RB48. And that's as low as I go from the players that I grab from the ECR. But there are some players missing here that I have projected. And that starts off with Jeff Wilson, who, like I said, I will have him pretty much ranked right there with Raheem Mostert. And so I'll probably end up having him maybe right ahead of Jamal Williams here, about running back 30. Then we have Khalil Herbert, who is supposed to be coming back this week. That should take the cap off of David Montgomery just a little bit. However, they haven't been utilizing him a whole lot differently compared to on the season as a whole. But anyways, he'll be coming back. I have him projected. It wasn't anything worth noting as far as how high up he is. Hopefully you wouldn't have to rely on that, plus the uncertainty factor. Then we have the Houston running backs, Royce Newman, Dare Ogunbowale, Rex Burkhead. None of them made it in here. I really would have wanted to avoid this. So Royce Newman ended up being like the best of the group. Is it Newman? That doesn't feel right. That feels like a offensive lineman for the Green Bay Packers. But Royce did the best last week, but I'm not expecting him to be in that kind of situation this week, nor find that kind of success. I forget their opponent, but I think it's a really good, like Tennessee maybe. And so I wouldn't expect him to be efficient, even if they stick in the game. And if they don't stick in the game, I wouldn't expect him to get the amount of usage that he got last week. Dare was the second most used running back last week, so I do expect him to probably be that running back, but the difference between him and Rex Burkhead's usage wasn't large enough to say for sure. Maybe it would be Rex, and that's why I just really would not want to mess with them. But I ended up projecting Royce Newman and Dare Ogunbowale, assuming that what we saw meant that Rex Burkhead was just kind of the extra guy, or the once they're so far behind, then he'll spell for Dare type of thing. Then Damian Harris could be coming back this week for New England. Don't really expect that to impact too much. Ramondre Stevenson maybe would take the chances of a touchdown for him down a little bit, something like that. But that's about it. He doesn't really project too well based on his usage this season and everything like that. So that's the running backs for this week. I'll be back with a wide receiver video shortly enough, or tomorrow morning most likely. Still need to do those projections and then all this. So peace out. Thank you very much. And let's get you into that championship, baby.